Hello and welcome to Luminar Coffee Break. I'm Angela Andrieux, and today I want to show you how to create a timeless black and white portrait. Let me go ahead and switch over to sharing my screen and we'll jump right in. I want to say hello to Joseph. Bonsoir de France. So glad you're able to join me this evening. And anyone else, if you have questions as we're going through today's session, make sure you pop those into the chat pod and I will do my best to get those answered for you. So up on the screen, we've got a beautiful couple, and black and white photos are just so beautiful and classic and timeless. And that's made up because of the rich tones, and there's just something by taking away the color, the distractions, they're just so beautiful and stand the test of time. So I'm going to show you how I converted this photo. Let me show you the before image up here. There's my before. It's a very nice photo, lovely couple. And then here's the after. And I'm really amazed at the range of tones and detail we were able to pull out in this image, even though it's just a JPEG. So normally I would encourage you to process raw photos, but you know, if all you have is a JPEG to work on, Luminar AI can do some pretty amazing things. Hello, Pat. Hello, Jerry. So glad to see you guys today. All right, so I'm going to right click on the image, go to adjustments, and revert this to the original. And then we'll have some fun. I'm going to start with a template. This is a really quick and easy way to get going with an image and see where the options can take you. So I'm going to take a look here for this photo. And I'm not seeing anything there that's really calling me. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down to the portrait categories and choose monochrome. And underneath this option, we have one called Soulful. And it gets us a lot closer to where I want to be. Now, I think some of the shadows are still a little bit too dark and the balance isn't quite right. So we're going to work this a little bit more, but I like the initial conversion. Hello, Russell. Hello, Joe. Good to see you guys. All right. And let's see. Russ says these videos are in color. Well, the video should be in color, but the image should be in black and white. So hopefully that's what you guys are seeing. All right. So now let's go over to the Edit tab and over to our tools. And I'm going to immediately scroll down to our super contrast. And this is such a wonderful tool in the professional section for fine-tuning all of your tones, especially with black and white. It works brilliantly on color photos too, but on black and white, it does some amazing things. So first thing I want to do is bring up my shadows contrast, increase the contrast in my shadows, and you'll see how that's bringing up some of those tones. We already have a little bit more detail over here on the left on her face. So I'm going to adjust then the shadows balance, and this is going to increase or decrease the amount of balance of that contrast, and I can actually pull that all the way down, and just those couple of sliders have really balanced out the tones. Now this side here, the gentleman, he's still a little bit bright. I wouldn't say he's quite blown out, but he's close. So let's adjust that highlights contrast. We can pull that up, and you'll see that's starting to very subtly pull back on those brightest of highlights. And then we can adjust the balance to make them brighter or pull them back a little bit. And I don't want to do too much because in order for a really great black and white to happen, you have to have a little bit of almost pure white and a little bit of almost pure black, and that everything in between, all of those rich tones, to really make it stand out. So we don't want to muddy up those lighter tones too much, but we don't really want them to stand out so much either. So I think that's pretty good. Let's take a look here at the before and after, just with super contrast. Now let's take a look at some of the portrait tools that were used. Because we applied a template, it did automatically do a little bit of corrections here in our portrait tools. Now under Face AI, it did a little bit of slim face. And you only really notice it if you take a look here at the before and the after. You especially see it on the man's chin, on his jawline. And I'm not sure he really needs that. It's not necessary for this particular photo, so I'm going to take that off and bring him back to his natural state. I think that's actually a bit more attractive. So that looks nice. Let me take a look here at the comments and see what everybody's saying. Nancy, hello from Canada. Pat says her face looks pretty flat. Would you think about trying to add any highlights? Well, we are going to lighten it up a little bit more than it is, but let's work with that a little bit. I wouldn't necessarily add any highlights, but you can see a little bit of the light reflecting right here along this portion of our face, and we do want to bring that out a little bit more and also bring up a little bit more detail on our hair. So we'll definitely work with that some more. All right. And let's see here. Oh, Russ says he put some links into the chat. about color. Okay, sounds good. All right, next step here is let's take a look at our histogram. So in case you're wondering where to view the histogram, you can go up to View and Show Histogram. And this is going to show us where all the various tones are in our image. You can see there's actually not a whole lot going up to the right, which are the brightest, widest parts of the image. But we are quite heavy here towards the left of the histogram, which are our dark grays and blacks. If you toggle the J key on your keyboard, that's going to show and hide your clipping warnings. So you can see we don't have any highlights clipped at this point. You can see nothing is touching this right end of the histogram, but we are clipping quite a lot of blacks. So let's see what we can do with that. I'm going to go up to our light tool and take a look here at our highlights, shadows, blacks, and whites, and maybe even a touch of smart contrast. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and turn off those clipping warnings by hitting the J key again. And let's start by pulling up the shadows a little bit more. And that's adding a little bit more dimension to our face. Like Pat had mentioned, like it just looked a little flat. So we're going to bring that up definitely a bit. And I definitely want to bring up the whites a little. And not because I want to make him so bright, but because we do need some of those lighter tones in the image. And you'll notice how that stretched out the histogram up here. And then we can take a look again at our clipping and take the J key. And you see we're clipping a little bit less in the blacks here. We're still clipping a little bit up here. So we can, if we like, adjust these blacks a little bit lighter here. Now you're not going to get rid of them entirely. And a couple of reasons for this. One is it's initially a very dark image. And because it's a JPEG, there's not as much data for us to pull out of it as there would have been if there was a RAW. But I think it's okay. We definitely want to see that there is some detail here in our hair, which we can see more so than we could initially. And I don't think there's any real important details in those areas that are being clipped. I think the story is right here in their face, in the faces. So I think that's looking really, really nice. All right. So maybe what we can do here, one more thing, is pull up that exposure overall a little bit, not too much. And I mean, look at that. It's really gorgeous. So now let's take a look at our before and our after. Let's do a couple of extra things. I want to make really obvious the heart shape that's in this image. So I don't know if you noticed there, if you take their heads and down in between them, we have a really lovely heart. So I'm going to do a couple of things to really accentuate that. The first is going to be a vignette. We'll do a nice big soft vignette to draw us into that shape. And then we'll do a tiny bit of dodging and burning to make sure that those areas are just intensified and people look at it. And even if they don't consciously see it, they can sense the connection. So I'm going to take my amount slider, pull that down to -100, go down into my advanced settings, and we'll bring up that feather nice and high. And we're going to add a touch of inner light here, not a lot, just enough to pull the eye into the center of that vignette. And then we'll take choose subject, and we're going to move this up subtly. So now we have a little bit less light here on their clothing and a little bit more light here on their faces. We'll then take the amount slider and then back that off to a point that looks natural. That looks pretty good. Now I want to take it a little bit further and just kind of accentuate the darkness here and a little bit of darkness here, just to really emphasize that heart shape, that bottom V of the heart. So we'll go down to our clone tool, or not clone tool, excuse me, we'll do dodge and burn, and we'll make sure we're in darken. We'll pull the strength really, really low, because we want to do several brush strokes at a really, really light amount as opposed to one thick brush stroke. So we're going to do several low strength brush strokes. I'll use the bracket keys on my keyboard to make that brush a bit bigger. You can make right or left bracket to make it smaller or larger. And I'm just going to subtly brush in a little bit of darkening to accentuate this heart shape down here. And it's going to be ever so subtle. Ever so subtle. We're just trying to draw the eye in and accentuate that heart. So there we go. And we could even take lighten at a soft strength and kind of lighten up a little bit of the side of her face a little. I think that might actually be a little bit strong. So let me undo those strokes. I'm going to hit Command Z. If you're on Windows, that'll be Control Z. And you'll notice I forgot to pull my strength down. So I'm going to pull that down. And now we'll do a nice big brush stroke really lightly just over this side of her face. Open that up just a little bit more. And I think that's looking absolutely gorgeous. One thing that when I did this topic for our insiders group, and if you're wondering what that is, go to insiders.skylum.com. If you're a Luminar AI user, you can join that free community. It's an awesome place. And we do a really long interactive Zoom call doing these same topics a week earlier. So I invite you to go check that out. It's a ton of fun. I know some of my regulars are here today, so it's always good to see people who want to see these topics frequently. So that's pretty cool. So one of the things that was brought up was getting rid of this line here right by the top of our head. So we can do that with our clone tool. And one thing about clone is it will take you back to the unedited image. So you can see here that it's hard to see that line in this image. So what I'm going to do is let's take and sample, let's say right about here, and then we're going to make that brush pretty small. We don't want to get the top of our head. And then we're just going to brush this out and get rid of that line up there. Now, if we click out of clone and let that reload, we'll see what we got. And we might need to touch it up a little bit more. Actually, that looks pretty good. We can grab that with our erase tool. So I'm going to go up to erase. And that's just going to be a little bit easier because you can actually see it with the changes. And then I'll go ahead and grab that, get rid of it, hit erase, and then we'll call this done. And that is such a gorgeous, timeless image. You know, you want to be somebody in a relationship that has that much love. And I think this image conveys that so perfectly. So let's take a look here at our before and our after. And that's how I would go about making a timeless black and white photograph. Let me take a quick look here at the comments and see if anybody has anything here to add. Let's see, Pat says right now there are highlights. Yes, there's some nice highlights in there. Erase. So the reason I didn't do the erase tool on that line initially, because I wanted to be in more control of where that was sampling from. So erase is, I would say, usually the smarter tool because it looks at the area around the piece that you're wanting to replace and it makes a decision for you. If you'd rather have control of what's being sampled in order to replace a certain area, that's where clone comes in and allows you to set your own reference point and then use that to clone in the pieces from where you choose. So in this instance, especially getting here close to her hair, I wanted to have a little bit more control. And then just that last little piece, it was easier to go in and do erase because there was a lot of area around it for it to sample from, and I knew it would do a pretty good job. So hopefully that gives you an idea there. See, David's asking about plans to upgrade the dodge and burn tool. David, let me know what you would like to see in the dodge and burn tool. But what I will suggest is instead of using dodge and burn, if you need more flexibility, to go over to local masking, choose add and basic. And this allows you to control all of these different aspects and then paint them in selectively where you need it. So you can simply do exposure and lighten or darken an area, or you can control it a little bit more precisely with highlights and shadows. You can even add or subtract detail and color if that's something you want to do. So if you're looking for more flexibility with dodge and burn, this is where I would go. But let me know in the chat or in the comments what you'd like to see differently, and I will certainly pass your feedback on to the team. All right, with that, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking some time to spend with me, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked this episode, make sure you give us a thumbs up here on YouTube. That's always appreciated. And leave your comments and questions in the chat below, and we'll do our best to get those answered for you. If you look through the description for today's episode, you might have also noticed a new link in there where we're asking for your feedback. So if you have ideas for Coffee Break, topics you'd like to see covered, things that you like, things that you don't like, let us know in that feedback. We're always looking to improve and make sure this show is valuable to you. So with that, I'll turn you loose. Wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Bye, everybody.